Hi, I'm Robbie Bobby. The title of this video is Camino Victory. In 2022, I walked approximately 500 miles across northern Spain on an ancient pilgrimage route called the Camino de Santiago. It took 32 days to complete the journey, which included 30 walking days and 2 rest days. Camino de Santiago translates to the way to Santiago. There are many Camino routes throughout Europe, but the most popular one is the Camino Frances, which starts in the medieval town of Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port in southern France. It ends in the northwest corner of Spain at a cathedral in the Galician capital of Santiago de Compostela, which houses the remains of the apostle St. James. It passes through about a dozen cities, including Pamplona, Burgos, and Leon, around 50 to 60 decent-sized towns such as Estella and Santo Domingo, and roughly 200 small villages, hamlets, and rural settlements, some with only a few dozen homes or just a single monastery, such as Roncesvalles and Sansol. It passes through mountains, including the Pyrenees, the Central Plains or Meseta. It uses hiking trails, paved walkways, roads, and occasionally the shoulder of a highway. At the end of each day, you'll find accommodations at the many albergues which are available along the way, which typically offer a bunk bed and shower for about $10 to $15, and often a 3-course meal for $12. Anyway, I don't have time in this video to describe all the ins and outs of walking the Camino, but walking one is an experience and adventure of a lifetime. So what made me walk the Camino? A better question is, what allowed me to walk the Camino? I had read the book The Pilgrimage by Paulo Coelho about 5 years earlier, and this planted the seed in my head. While I did fantasize about walking it at the time, I also believed it was just that, a fantasy. I believed it would be absolutely impossible to actually do it, so the idea was quickly dismissed. Then, 5 years later, a friend mentioned that it was on his bucket list, and this made me look at it again. This time, however, I decided to go for it. What changed? Well, when I first read The Pilgrimage, I was working the 12 steps through the Al-Anon program and was struggling with the God steps. The Pilgrimage was one of the many spiritual books I read in order to open my mind to what God or higher power meant to me. A few years later, I migrated into ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics, and was working the steps in that program. This is where I learned about my childhood conditioning that made me fearful to try new things. I learned to recognize my critical inner voice, otherwise known as the critical inner parent, that told me that walking a Camino would be impossible. And while I could not simply turn off this critical voice, I was able to say, "Thank you for the warning," and then start planning my Camino. This was my first Camino victory. It would be followed by many more. For example, getting from the airport in Madrid to the start point in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port was a victory in and of itself. It was 300 miles away, and I had no train ticket or specific plans. I only knew roughly what my options would be once I was in Madrid. I wound up taking a train to Pamplona and then a cab to Saint-Jean, and at 7:30 p.m. that evening, I rolled into town and secured a bed with the help from the local Pilgrim office. This was a leap of faith, as I normally have to plan things out 100% in advance. Making it was a victory. Trusting myself to get there was also a victory. Actually, every day on the Camino was a victory. Some days, each step was a victory. For example, the day I arrived in Leon, I walked 23 miles with about a dozen blisters on my feet. Each step was painful. Each step was a victory. Prior to the Camino, if I got a blister while hiking, you would not see me on the trail again until that one blister was completely healed. Adapting to the Camino includes adapting to pain and discomfort, to things not going your way. It includes relying on help from outside of yourself to keep going. On the day to Leon, I think I asked God for help on each and every step. I got there. Arriving at the Cathedral in Santiago de Compostela was another victory. I made it. But it was made possible by the many victories along the way. Some small, some large, but all important. This is what I reflected on as I sat in the square looking up at the cathedral and looking at hundreds of other pilgrims who had also made it. The amount of victory in that square was mind-boggling. I met a woman whose husband died on the Camino a few years earlier. They had been walking it together. She came back to complete the journey with the support of a few of her friends. She broke her leg within the first week, got it patched up, and continued. I met a man from the UK who lost all short-term memory as a side effect of COVID. He was biking the Camino on his own. He had to write himself notes every night so he would know where he was in the morning and where he had to go. He made it. I contact him periodically and begin my text with, "Hello, Russell. This is Robbie. We met on the Camino," and include a picture of us. When I got home, I realized the Camino was a special kind of classroom, that the 500 miles was the little Camino that teaches me how to walk, at least more spiritually, in the big Camino. It helped me see that what I described earlier as my first Camino victory, the decision to go, as a program victory, recovery victory, and therefore a life victory as well. Because without recovery, I would have continued to focus on the long list of reasons why I couldn't or shouldn't go, that I couldn't handle it physically, mentally, or emotionally, that I didn't deserve to spend the time and money on myself, that I should be more productive, or that I would have a miserable time, or get lost, or get injured. My Camino was truly the result or byproduct of working my program, maybe part of the spiritual awakening that Step 12 promises. For one thing, it was definitely a big Step 11 from beginning to end, as it involved a lot of prayer and meditation, as well as reliance on a power greater than myself. There was an old-timer in my first Al-Anon meeting, John G., who used to describe program as being in a river that kept taking him to a better place. Mine took me to the Camino de Santiago. And that ends this story, which could have been titled, From 12 Steps to a Million Steps. I'm Robbie Bobby. Thank you for listening, and as always, keep coming back.